right, folks. Here we are. It's the Outdoor Report podcast, and this is episode number 4. And we are recording this, I guess, kind of live. It won't be live when you're listening to it, but we're recording it from the Smoky Hills Outdoor Studio, which is a.k.a. the Outdoor Report Ice Castle Fish House. And it's in my driveway. So we're in my driveway, in the fish house. Sitting across from me right now is my two neighbors. One of them is Joe Hemmerich. The other one's Jake Moscho. And they're here to try to give some insight of what's going on in the world and try to solve some of the problems. But I guess you could call one of them a voice of reason and the other one's a voice of logic. And I'm just a voice. But before we get into our guests today, we wanted to have a little, you could call it a BS session, which is, I guess you could say we took that from the Wired to Hunt crew. But we're just going to get into our deer season. All three of us were huge into hunting, especially whitetail deer hunting. The day that we're recording this right now is Monday, November 20th. 21st?
20th.
It's the 20th.
My watch is wrong.
You might want to get that checked.
Idiot.
Haley, if you're listening, Joe needs a new watch for Christmas. But so we're just gonna kind of give a little bit of a rundown, give a little bit of rundown of what we learned this year when it comes to deer hunting, and hopefully we can shed some light for others that are listening if we found anything valuable, or maybe it's worthless. But bear with us while we chat about it a little bit. So, Joe, why don't you start off? What did you learn this deer hunting season? And the reason we're getting into that, and you might say whatever, quit whining, you guys tagged out, wham, but we're fortunate, the three of us that tag out, which hasn't happened since we've gotten to know each other really this early in season. One of us has been hunting late, so we haven't really been knowing what to do with ourselves lately, so we've been making up reasons to get out in the woods and whatnot. But let's cover a little bit of what we learned. So, Joe, thoughts from the season this year?
Thoughts from the season this year. I would say number one is lesser a word.
Lesser?
Lesser.
Lesser works.
Lesser is better is my number one from this year.
Less is more. Is that right? I think that's the right.
I think that's how you want to.
Lesser is better though. Works for you.
Lesser is better.
You're trying to rhyme it. I see what you're doing.
Less is better. When I first got into hunting, I was in there every 3 days checking cameras, trying to find the right tree, in there all the time with four-wheeler, on foot. I don't know. Everything that I could possibly do, I was out there preseason, and little did I know, goofing everything up, checking trail cameras. But the older I get, the more I realize the less I should be out there. I'm trying to get everything done by, I don't know, August, even earlier. That would be my number one, is just being out there less preseason and trying to make it just as fresh as possible on your first sit. I would say that's my number one thing that I'm trying to improve on more and more every year. Definitely plays to your benefit, I would say.
How did you apply that this year?
This year I had all my sets set by, I would say, September 1st-ish, besides my run and gun sets. And in past years I would set them like the day before.
Sure.
I would say. Number two, this is something I really had to work on this year. Save your best stands for your best possible time to hunt them. When I first started hunting, I never paid attention to wind. It was just non-existent. Time of year, maybe food sources. Nowadays I'll hunt food sources early season for those summer bucks. Your rut stands deeper into the woods where they're going to be scent checking does and so on. Just saving your best stands for late October, early November really played a part this year and last year, actually. Just waiting for the perfect time and not give away your scent or any sort of location early in the season and burning your stands out before they even really get good. My third one I got to give credit to Wes. Always wear your harness. I never wore a harness in the past 5 or 6 years of bow hunting. Never wore a harness. He rode me for the last 2 or 3 years, and I kind of shrugged it off. I don't know why, but I just decided to wear it. I don't know, it's probably my 4th or 5th sit this year. For whatever reason.
Wait, you weren't wearing one before the 4th or 5th sit?
Negative.
God dang it, me.
No, I decided to start wearing my harness, and it just so happened the first time I wore it, I had an owl fly almost directly into my face, and I lost my balance. I caught myself, but I almost fell out of the tree, and it just made me think about why to wear your harness, because you can do everything right, but something can happen outside of your control, I would say.
Good point.
So,
your little bambino.
If not for you, do it for your friends and family.
You wouldn't. Yeah, you never know. That's a good point. Very good point.
Right, Jake?
Mm-hmm.
Jake, did you wear a harness this year?
Not one.
You didn't wear a harness. I think that'll change.
I think it'll change too.
When you wake up in the morning, look at Addie's face. I'm
go.
laying on thick.
I'm gonna put a picture of
Yeah.
you in your bowl.
Well, to your point, I mean, I don't like to be a stickler about it, but when that happened to me last year, when I passed out in the tree stand, it's like, thinking about being in the tree 10 years ago, even when I was 19, 18, 17, you're way up there, you're just sitting on a platform.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
Something that can fail.
it's pretty sketchy. But good 3 points, Joe.
Appreciate it.
You learned a lot this year.
I did learn 3 things.
Jake?
Some of the 3 things I really narrowed down to try to learn this year, or came away from the season, was to try to stay open-minded to new ideas and try to push your limits. I've always been a big fan of very deep woods type stands and never really liked to hunt field edges, and I tried doing that a little more this year. And I always seem to get in somewhat of a rut where I've seen deer from this stand, so I should hunt this stand again and not move or not try this run and gun. And unless you do that, you don't have the opportunity to see what would happen. So don't be afraid of the what if factor, and you just go for it. You have to try things.
It's interesting because that's opposite of when you said that you always hunted deep woods rather than fields. Mm-hmm. Most people go straight to fields because they want the view rather than deep woods. Mm-hmm. What made you grow up, or how did you start that way?
I just kind of realized that that's all I was hunting. Was every time I would go scout a property or look for something, I always seemed to just go to the deep woods, and I've had success, but not a ton of success, and I wanted to try to open my horizons and broaden, like, how can I up my numbers and my percentage and just anything to better it. And that was something that I looked at myself and said, well, that's something I'm not doing.
Yep.
So I gave that a try this year, and I saw many more opportunities and just a lot of different perspectives. You can observe a lot more and get a better idea how deer utilize a certain area from the field edge, and then maybe make a move on them. And that goes back to, like, not being afraid to move in or move a stand and do this or that. Mm-hmm. Another thing, like Joe, when I first started to hunt, I was not big on the wind or scent control nearly as much. This year I really hammered on myself to really get after scent control. Before every sit, I took a scent-free shower. I always made sure all my clothes were getting sprayed down with scent killer, and always was watching the wind this year. And I saw my numbers of deer that I saw skyrocketed, and I firmly believe it was because of those reasons, that deer weren't necessarily smelling me in the stand, and or after my hunts I was leaving less scent in the woods, and just all of the above. I think it just improves everything about your hunting, just all of it.
Did either of you guys get busted this year? Scent?
I never got busted once, and I had multiple deer downwind of me this year for sure. One final lesson that I learned here is not to get too caught up in the moment. I actually ended up harvesting a younger buck than what I thought I was harvesting at the time during the rifle season. I saw the deer trotting, running through brush at about 75 yards, and by the time I got scope on him, I could only see part of the rack. Thought it was a different deer that I had on camera. Got excited, got too hurried, took a shot, hit the deer. When I walked up to the deer, I realized it was a 1.5-year-old, not at all what I was hoping to kill, and it also had really nice genetics and potential for future. I was very excited to harvest the deer, but it's still, just knowing what could have been and the genetics that the deer had really bummed me out. And so I would say just to always like take that extra 30 seconds or however long it takes to, even if it means you'll miss out on an opportunity, at least you know 100% you didn't shoot or do something wrong with going after a deer that you didn't want to harvest.
Sure.
But devil's advocate on that one, I went to his house a few minutes after this happened and telling me the story. He was pretty tickled. He shared this moment with his sister, and they actually both shot deer the same morning, and I think he got the same feeling as if he would have shot a giant.
I definitely got, it was very exciting and all that, and I tried to put a good attitude forwards, but the fact that I did harvest a younger buck, I really wish I could have let the deer live. I definitely got a great memory and experience out of harvesting the deer, but if I could go back in time, I would maybe not harvest that deer in potential of seeing and having a chance to harvest that deer now next fall or the fall after that, and seeing what it could have grown into.
Sure. Yeah.
Now you know.
Huh?
Now you know.
Now you know.
It's always interested me how you can hunt and hunt and hunt, and it seems like every time you have an encounter with a deer, you learn something new. And as soon as you think, okay, this is how this goes, I get this next time, something else happens, and you always learn something new.
Yep.
I agree with you. What's cool about it is the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because how many minutes or seconds pass from when your sister shot it to when you shot it?
Not under 30 seconds.
So, what a memory.
Yeah.
I mean,
awesome family memory.
Could she detect any of your disappointment? Did you have disappointment right at the first day, or was it later that you felt like...
I definitely, when we tracking my deer, and I saw it laying, and then I got walking up on it to about 10 yards away, and I could see the rack good. Then I displayed some disappointment, where I was like, no.
She's
no.
Like, what? We found it!
She detected that, and this was her first time hunting in a long time, first time she'd ever seen a deer from stand. And so she detected that and was somewhat confused. And when I registered that a little bit, and then I tried to mask it some. And I kind of explained, I said, well, I really didn't want to harvest a young deer with such good potential. But this is really, really cool that we were able to do this together, and so on and so forth. And it was an awesome memory to be able to share. And that, like Wes said, that's 100% why we do it and what the sport's all about. Like, even if you do shoot a small deer, if you get awesome memories, that's so worth it.
Yep. And I know what your intentions, what you're going for. So I can understand the flip coin of it too.
Right, exactly.
But it was an equal way. I can see where you would definitely do that. I would be on the same page.
Right.
Anything else?
That's really all I have.
That's what you learned this year?
Shout out to my brother. He shot a nice buck this year for his first time.
Tell us about that.
In a nutshell, my brother lives in the cities, and he'd been itching for a few years in a row to come up, and it just worked out this year. And he came out, we got him a license, and we sat, second weekend, we sat Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and he was supposed to go home Sunday around lunchtime, and he said, no, we hadn't seen a single deer, and it was really disappointing. So I changed up tactics, took him to a different spot. He really wanted to shoot his first deer, and he really wanted it to be a buck. And I said, well, realistically, let's just try and get you a doe. And so we go to the spot where I know there's deer. We sit on the ground, because I didn't have any double sets. And we set up, and we had deer, we had a doe right away, busted us as we were setting up. And then another one came behind us, winded us. She came from a total wrong direction, winded us, and didn't get a shot at her. And then we had a doe, probably an hour later, closer to 4:30, coming straight at us. And he says, deer, deer, deer. So he gets all set up. He's getting ready to shoot her. She's probably at 50, 60 yards. And I hear something to my left. And I'm looking. I told him to wait because I thought it was another deer. So he waited. And I still hadn't seen it yet. And the doe that he was going to shoot had gone to the right out of his shooting area. So he was not able to shoot her. So then I'm really panicking. And all of a sudden I finally see the body of the deer. And I thought it was a fawn right away, to be honest, because it was kind of far away and looked funny. But crossed the fence, and then I saw it had a rack, and I go, "It's a buck, Sam." And so he switches his direction over. He gets all set up, and it actually looked like a halfway decent buck. And comes right out in the shooting lane. I stopped him, and he fired, and he put a really good shot on. It walked away slowly, and he proceeded to shoot 2 more times and miss. I think he was a little excited at that point. He told me he was shaking. And then I told him to slow down, rack another shell, take your time, and he shot for a 4th time, and that was a lethal shot. Put him down, and we walked on him, and he said I shot a buck probably 10 times in a row. He was so excited. It was a great moment to share with my brother. Awesome to get someone out for the first time. Sometimes I think I enjoy that more than hunting myself.
Yep.
I love the feeling of someone getting really excited about something and introducing them to something that they've never done before, something that I really enjoy and I want to share with others. Similar to taking your son Carter out sucker fishing. That's a whole nother ball game, though.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, but no, I just love getting people outdoors and sharing my passion with others and just using that as a platform for great conversation and awesome talks. And yeah, I couldn't be happier.
Nice. You're such a good guide.
Thank you.
All right.
Unpaid.
Unpaid guide, yeah. What I learned this year, one of the things I learned, I kind of learned it last year, but it was reinforced this year, is that a gut shot deer will die. It's just a matter of time, and if you play your cards right, it'll die. But Dad's last year that he hit was gut shot, and we found it 100 yards away. Greg's was gut shot. This year at the Quack, there was a gut shot. And then the doe that I hit this year down in Winona was gut shot. But on my doe, I gut shot. It was a bad shot. I had a bad shot this year on a doe. It was about 70, 80 yards. Hit her in the guts. Saw the guts coming out as she went away. And it was probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I didn't go chase it. I went in the next morning and she was there. So, gut shot deer will die. But you got to play your cards pretty darn right. Otherwise, if you go on after it, you're going to push it. And you're not going to recover it. So, when in doubt, always back out. I know that's been said and mentioned many times, but that was reinforced for me this year that a gut shot deer will go down. Any shot deer could go down. After Joe's future brother-in-law Roy, after seeing a deer shot with an arrow riding the neck up, it's just they're amazing animals, and you see a lot of times where they don't go down and they just keep carrying on through. They carry an injury for years, and it can make it through. So I mean, it's weird to see some hits on a deer and it doesn't go down, and you see some that you would think they would never go down and it goes down. So don't lose hope if you're tracking and you lose blood. Don't give up. Go back. The second thing that I learned, and I don't know if this is good advice or bad advice, because I think the more time that you can spend in the woods is just going to increase your odds. But I know we talked about this, is focus. We're all, the three of us here all have families or are building families. I'm sure a lot of you are busy with work and families. And it's obviously a matter of time, of being able to have time and make time to get out. I feel like in the future I'm going to focus more on hunting and saving all my time for whitetail hunting late October, until that first week or so into gun season in November. Because I know early season's good to catch them when they don't know what's going on. And I agree to hunt some of that early stuff right away to try to get them before they're educated. But after that, I really question if it's worth the time. And again, any time is a good time to be in the woods. Whenever it's right for you, if you do have time to choose, I'm tempted to put more marbles into waiting till the 24th, 25th, 26th, and then just hunt as much as you can through that time when the rut's going on. Because I've shot the past 3 deer the 29th, and this is a mature buck. I mean, I do feel that mature deer are smarter. They got it figured out. Obviously, you never can prevent outside sources or other things from pushing it, coyote or gun season, people pushing deer, but all my mature bucks that I've been fortunate to harvest have been 29th, the 2nd, and the 16th, I think, of November. The other two are November 2nd and then October 29th. Yep. So that's one thing that I might have to... early season, I think, focus on waterfowl or getting Carter out doing something.
Honeydew
list, and saving the time for the rut, because that's when it's nuts. Yep. And I think that's when it's the funnest time to be in the woods.
I have a what did you learn for you?
Sure.
Don't shoot a nice buck on your 3rd day of your rutcation, Wes.
Right. You take off for days at a time, and then you're fortunate enough to have it happen. And I was thinking about that earlier too. If I didn't shoot the buck, I would have made time to get out in the woods for the last 2-3 weeks. I don't know how in the hell I would have made time the last 2-3 weeks to get in the woods because I've been swamped with everything. Yep. But if deer hunting's on the line, it's happening. So I find it interesting. Right. Looking back, I'm like, how could I have ever gotten out the last couple of weeks? But it works.
You always make time.
So, tip of the hat to our spouses and any of you out there that understand what it means to get out and hunt, because generally, if you can make the time, it's going to happen. The other thing I learned this year is that you can bump a mature buck at least once out of its bed, and more than likely he's going to keep bedding in that area. I went into a spot early season 2 days before the opener of archery, and this is a add-on to what we learned. We were behind the 8 ball, and I'd have to say all 3 of us were behind the 8 ball on getting stands hung and trimmed in a matter of, or before the season started, because we were nipping right on the heels. And I was going into a set, and I knew we were going in too late trying to get it, but I had to get it done sooner or later. So I went in, and it was a spot 100 yards from a house where kids are and they play, that this nice mature buck was bedding. And I had no idea I never thought a buck would be there or in that travel corridor, and I bumped him out. And I thought to myself, I just ruined that spot, and I wasn't sure if he'd come back or what would, and I didn't have another access route to get into this spot. It's one way in, one way out. So I bumped him 2 days before season. I trimmed my tree, got out of there. I didn't hunt it for another week or two. And then 2 weeks later, I went back in. I tried to circle around the spot that he was at, kind of like a moon. I mean, it's only about 100, 150 yards off, so it's still close quarters. But tried to get around him, and he was in a different spot, but walked right into him and bumped him again. So it's good to see that if you do bump one, there's a good chance he's still going to stay in the core area. After I bumped him the second time, I never actually hunted back in that spot. I hunted on a similar spot on that same property, and I did see him over there, which was a little ways away from where he was before. But I think he'd still be using the core area. So I could even say that even 2 times bumping him lightly, and again, it was a light bump. It was just walking. There wasn't gunfire at it. So there's some reason to believe there, if you bump a buck once or twice, that you still got a shot. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if that's different from when you're actually in the stand and something happens that they get shot at and spooked. Yep. But just from walking in and spooking, And I don't know if that helped too, because you had people there with kids and noise and all of that.
So he was maybe a little acclimated to the human scent, and having maybe some kids every once in a while throw a ball back towards that
bumping
direction.
back towards him. Yep, they
Or
four-wheel
whatever.
there every now
Right.
and then. So
Maybe that's something he had learned to live with a little bit, to the point of just changing a bed a little distance and still living in the area.
So those are the 3 things that I learned. That's what Joe, Jake, and I learned for the season. We hope you can take something from that. Let's get to the guest that we have on today. So I've been fortunate enough to meet this guy. His name is Ryan Tebo. I met him up when we were working on an elk research project that the DNR was working on a year and a half ago, and we went out and filmed it for the TV show that we had for the Outdoor Report. So we will get him on the phone shortly, but we're going to follow up with Ryan and talk a little bit about what happened, and kind of if there's any consensus that came about with the elk research up in the northwest part of Minnesota. And then recently he has been studying squirrel mortality in the Whitewater State Forest. So that I'm kind of interested to chat with him on. You don't really hear about squirrel studies. And then what I'm really interested in as well is he's just finishing up this squirrel study, and he's going to be taking on a project in regards to the CWD that's going on with the Minnesota DNR. So I'm excited for that. I don't know if many of you know what's going on with CWD. You will hear a lot of it from Ryan. It's something that you don't want to take lightly. It is kind of a serious thing that's happening in our state and many states across the country. They're trying to figure out ways to work with it and manage it, which is very difficult. But it's something that you need to educate yourself on and learn about and understand what's going on. And there's ways, I think, that we as a state can be proactive to take some measures to try to help prevent the spread of it. There's a lot of different speculations out there. I'll let Ryan touch base on some of it. And then a lot of people, and this is part of, for myself, this is something that kind of gets me worked up, kind of grinds my gears a little bit. But myself, growing up, I wanted to be what Ryan was doing, a wildlife research biologist, conservation officer, not sure, but something in those lines. And the reason why I wanted to go into that was because I loved hunting, I loved outdoors, I loved wildlife. So I wanted to conserve it. I wanted to be involved with it. I wanted to try to help make a difference. So that's one thing, and a lot of emotions came out with the CWD thing, because you have to take some extreme measures to try to understand what's going on. And I understand the hunters and the sportsmen, that they need to be a voice and stand up, and DNR needs to hear from them and vice versa. But some of the ways that people handle expressing themselves gets frustrating, because at least we've got an agency that cares, and we're fortunate enough to be in a country to have an agency that cares about the wildlife. So that's one thing where I'm interested to talk with Ryan, just because it's a position I wanted to be in. They catch a lot of flack, the DNR does. Yes, they do things right. Yes, they do things wrong. Some indifferent. But if we can come together more as problem solvers than creating problems or throwing more, I don't know, what was that? What would be the word? More flack with it all. That's something I'd like to see more of. So it would be fun to talk with Ryan. He's a fellow hunter. He's just like us, and he works for the DNR and is working on trying to understand the wildlife that we've got going on. So if you take a little bit from that, I don't want to sound preachy, but if you get onto a social media platform and there's stuff going down in regards to the DNR or wildlife, whether it be the deer, the CWD, the elk, fish on Mille Lacs, whatever it is, express your opinion, but be conscious of how you're expressing it, because some of the stuff you see is pretty shameful for a sportsman to be throwing out. But so that's my rant over that. I'm sorry to get into that, but I had to get that off my chest. So further ado, we're gonna get Ryan on the phone here, and we're gonna see what's happening with the elk, the squirrel, and the deer in Minnesota. But before we get Ryan on the phone, we got to take one quick break to introduce our new sponsor. It's Artistic Taxidermy out of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. Josh Lynn reached out to us at the Outdoor Port a few months ago. Wanted to try to create some content, submit some of his own content. So that's how we first met Josh, and then we were chatting with him a little bit after I shot my buck because I wanted to bring the buck to him for taxidermy, and he mentioned, I want to be part of the Outdoor Report. I want to be the official taxidermist. So I was able to meet Josh, chat with him. Great guy. He's got a very cool family. Gets his family out hunting. They get outdoors. So it was, I feel, a good fit. So here's a word from Josh from Artistic Taxidermy.
Hey, it's Josh Lynn at Artistic Taxidermy with your tip of the week. Tell your crazy uncle to put the knife away. It's your trophy. You make the call. You do the research so that the cuts are correct. Too many times capes are ruined by that eager, knife-toting hunting partner. Stop, research, and make sure the skinning and gutting is done right so that your trophy is flawless. And that is your tip of the week. I'm Josh Lynn from Artistic Taxidermy. Visit us on our Facebook page at Artistic Taxidermy in Detroit Lakes.
There you go. Thanks, Josh. Let's get Ryan on the line.
Hey, Wes, what's going on?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Hey, appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and talk to us.
Not a problem.
I appreciate it. Just to give you perspective, right now I'm sitting up in a fish house and I have the neighbors with me. Neighbor one is Joe Hemmerich and neighbor two is Jake Moscho. So they're big outdoor nuts. So they're going to be on the call here too, if you don't mind, and we'll be chatting away on it.
Not a problem at all.
All right. Well, we've got notes and spreadsheets sitting out here. We got tons of questions. So we might be jumping out all over the place. So I'll try to keep it on track here. And I think we'll jump into it right away because we got tons of questions for you.
Sure. Are you guys actually fishing? Are you fishing right now?
We're not fishing right now. Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope, we're in a driveway. I thought about
Even
that.
Better. Even better.
Yeah, I know. I kind of like the idea of it though, because I think once we get enough ice, we could do a couple podcasts from the fish house.
That'd be awesome.
Yep. We'll get you into the do you ice fish?
I generally don't because when I ice fish, normally everyone doesn't catch anything. So I'm trying to change that, but I haven't been out very much. So yeah.
Are you in southern Minnesota?
Yeah, just south of Mankato.
Okay, yeah. So there's not quite as many lakes down there, is there?
Very limited, and they're not lakes that I am terribly excited about trying to ice fish on. So
okay, sure. Well, to get going, I just, to give everyone a brief rundown, if you don't mind, introducing yourself and giving us kind of a walkabout of how you became, because I think if I got your title right, you're a wildlife research biologist, correct?
Yep.
So, I mean, for me, I'm extremely excited to chat with you just because that's something that, I had dreams when I was younger about getting into. So if you could give us kind of a little brief history of how you got to where you're at and kind of how that all came to be on that end of it.
Sure. Yeah, it kind of started back how a lot of people's outdoor stories start, where, I spent a lot of time when I was younger being lugged up and down hills where we deer hunt in Wisconsin. And I knew in high school that I kind of wanted to see what the wildlife management track would do. So I did my undergrad at University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, and did my degree there in wildlife research and management. And after that, did a couple field jobs, went out to California, did a project capturing and tracking fishers in the mountains. And after that, I did some sharp-tailed grouse research as well as some white-tailed deer research, working for a handful of different folks. And then decided that it was time to hit grad school. So I was lucky enough to know some folks down in southern Illinois and did my graduate research at Southern Illinois University looking at how prescribed fire affects wild turkeys and their nest choices. So I got done there in 2011 and did a little bit of some technician work in Wisconsin, and then came to Minnesota as a 6-month technician. And I was there to work on a deer depredation project, looking at crop exclosures in the southeast part of the state to compare deer damage within and outside of these exclosures to get an idea of how much damage deer actually cause. And just so happened that one of the folks, one of the permanent staff in my current office in Madelia, decided that she was going to head back home to Utah and they needed someone to fill that position. And I luckily had a master's degree, which was a requirement, and I have been there ever since, which was August of 2015.
So that's when you came and have been with the Minnesota DNR.
So I started with DNR in March of 2015, and then did the work on the depredation project in the southeast part of the state. And then once the employee left, they transitioned me to my current position.
Okay.
Yeah, one of those like right place, right time kind of scenarios. So.
Sure, and that's like when growing up. How old are you, Ryan?
29.
All right, so we're very similar in age. Growing up, when I was looking into it, I always heard that was one of the tough things of going into your field of work was trying to get a job. Is that still hold true?
Yeah, I know it's challenging. I know folks that I did my undergrad with, and they decided real quickly that even though they had the degree, it wasn't something they were going to keep going after. But there's a lot of folks, I think the people that were genuinely passionate about it worked hard and sooner or later caught on somewhere. But it is a lot of who you know in this field. I can't even begin to talk about how many times that I've run into folks that I've met here or there, and it all kind of comes back around and you meet them again. So it can be challenging, but where there's a will, there's a way, I guess.
Sure. So how many years of school did you have to go through for where you're at?
So I did 4 years of undergrad, and then I was doing my master's for 3.5.
Okay.
So I think that's it might be a little bit longer than standard for a master's degree. I think some folks can get it done in 2.5, 3 years.
So with the line of work that you went, how did hunting and did hunting come into play first, or did you have a love for wild? What came first and to lead you down the path that you're at, and what did you do to get into hunting on your end of it?
It was definitely hunting and fishing, definitely. All that time spent squirrel hunting or deer hunting, all the questions that I had about, wildlife and kind of the natural world led me to want to go down that track, and a lot of wildlife management stuff just seemed like it was really cool and something I really wanted to do. But I don't know that I would have went that direction if it weren't for my dad's background, deer hunting, and had he not taken me with him from the time that I was 8, 10 years old, I don't know if I would have still gone that direction, but that's kind of what I attribute it to.
Sure. Where did you grow up hunting then?
So I grew up hunting just to the south of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and kind of coming full circle. That's what I'm in the process of doing this week. Is I'm back home gun deer hunting with my dad and my uncles on that same property that I grew up kind of
really
learning the tricks of the trade out there. So it's always kind of cool coming back and getting back in the woods that kind of started it all.
Sure. What's the hunting been like over there so far for you this year?
It's been fairly slow. There were 2 8-pointer shot on the property opening day. It's about 250 acres, so it's a pretty big piece. But we haven't been seeing a ton of deer. I saw a small buck in the doe and 2 fawns tonight, so that was a pretty solid night for us out there.
Sure. What so I got to ask you, and I'm gonna pull up your picture here of the buck that you shot over in Minnesota.
Sure.
Give us a lowdown on that, because that had to be quite the night or the day for you.
Yeah, I still can't believe it. I spent a lot of time hunting and sitting in a tree stand, just hoping a deer like that would ever give me an opportunity. And
so now this is bow hunting, correct?
This is archery, yes. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Are you do you do more bow hunting than gun hunting?
The last few years, I've actually done more gun hunting.
Okay.
If I got to pick what I would like to do, it would definitely be archery. It's just I've done a lot more waterfowl hunting the last few years, and that's taken away from archery.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of lucked into a nice spot this year that made me want to sit every day I could. Once I realized what I had. So,
did you see this buck earlier in the year?
I saw him the second day I sat at the property, and then the night of that second hunt, we pulled trail camera pics, and he was on it, and that's when we realized that we had some deer that we did not expect to see on this property.
What how did it all go out? Or were you kind of, if you can go into detail a little bit of kind of how you were posted up and how you exactly were able to get a crack at that one?
Yeah, sure. So my roommate and I got access to the property. It's only a 40-acre parcel, but it's all wooded, and it's kind of a river corridor type piece of property. So we had gone in there and hung stands late September because we hadn't gotten access to it early on in the year, and we were like, well, we got a lot going on. We'll kind of check back in on things once it gets towards the end of October, because we were just busy and weren't going to really get a chance to hunt. So we both went in October 29th, I believe. It was the last weekend of October, and we just went in and we're like, well, don't know what to expect. And I don't know that I've ever seen more deer activity that first sit that we went in. And my roommate hunts in the southwestern part of Wisconsin, so pretty big buck territory down there. So he's seen plenty of days with some nice deer, and he even said that he's never seen more deer activity.
On the 29th?
On the 29th of October, yep.
Wow, it's funny that because that was and we won't get into ours, but that Joe and I killed 2 bucks on the 29th of October this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's just ironic.
They were just running wild. I couldn't believe it. I almost killed one within 10 minutes of being in the stand, and I'm glad I didn't, because I thought he was one of the bigger bucks on the property, and I was unaware of what else was out there. But I had seen a smaller 9-pointer, and then I had drawn back on one just after shooting light that looked like he was outside the ears, and at least an 8-pointer, and he busted me drawing back. And he was looking directly at me, so I couldn't shoot. He was at 17 yards, and ended up that later that morning, I actually saw the deer I ended up shooting. And when I saw him come through, I thought, oh my goodness, that thing is huge. And I saw him then the next day, Sunday morning. He was coming through on a trail like 70 yards away, and I could not peel him off that trail. And then I saw him that evening as well. And he was just thrashing trees and making scrapes. And again, I tried calling or rattling, anything to get his attention, and he didn't have much interest. But those 2 days, that Saturday and Sunday, myself and my roommate saw bucks chasing does. I think we both saw more bucks than does. He saw a buck breed a doe, and we just couldn't believe it. We were like, this is crazy. So then I hunted Monday and saw a few smaller bucks that morning. Couldn't hunt that evening. Hunted Tuesday morning. Saw another small buck, and he was chasing does still. So I thought, man, it's still on. And then I had to go to work Tuesday and spent most of the afternoon in the office, and it was 4 o'clock, and I was sitting there thinking, God, I got to get back out there. So I finally got in stand about 4:45, and I think shooting light was just about 6:45. So I was like, well,
is that Halloween?
That was Halloween, yes.
Okay.
And I was like, well, anytime I can spend in the stand at this point, I got to be there. And I couldn't have been up there more than 45 minutes, and a really nice 7-pointer came by me, and he walked right by me about 12, 15 yards, and I have not shot big deer ever. The biggest bucks I have on my wall are 1.5-year-olds, and none have more than 8 points, I don't think. So passing these deer was something I'd never even thought of doing. It was just I'd seen some other really nice ones and knew they were there, so it's like, well, I gotta let this one go. And I let the smaller, well, he was a good sized 7-point walk by, took a video of him, sent it to my friends and said, boy, I hope I don't regret this. And not 2 minutes later, I looked to my left and here came the deer that I ended up shooting.
Wow.
And I first saw him at about 60 yards. He came angling to me, got to the trail out in front of me, and was walking by at about 15 yards. And I had to draw with him out in front of me because otherwise I was scared he'd see me because he was angling to me. And I drew, looked down, and he hadn't seen me draw. And as soon as I realized that, I thought, oh boy, now I got to stop him. And that thought had just crossed my mind, and he just stopped on his own. So I put the pin where I wanted, let an arrow fly, and as soon as it hit him, blood came just pouring out. And I thought the placement looked good, and he turned to run, and that's when I noticed my arrow was hanging what looked like all the way out of him. And he took off running, and then the arrow fell out. So then I started second guessing what had happened. But in the end, though, he was hard shot. He only went 100 yards, but I think what happened was I hit the inside of his opposite shoulder, and the tip snapped, and then the arrow just came right back out.
Oh, so it came out the way that it entered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which would scare the crap out of me.
Right.
I was like, that's not good. That's not good at all.
Wow.
But my roommate came and reassured me that he was down, and we found a lot of blood, and never had a moment where we thought that we needed to get down on hands and knees and work. It was a solid blood trail right to him. So
awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And once we found him, I just lost it.
I imagine so. It's one of those lifetime experiences. Again, you got in the stand at 5:45?
4:45.
4:45, and it's getting dark at what time? 6:30?
I think it was close to 6:30, 6:45.
You had about an hour and a half or so of hunting?
Yeah. Yep. And I think I recall him coming out about 5:45, something like that. I hadn't been there long, not at all.
There's a good lesson learned there, folks, who's ever listening. If you don't think you can go out and hunt because you don't have enough time, just go outside. That's the biggest trick, isn't it?
Yeah, and another crazy thing too was he was coming out to a cornfield that they were in the middle of picking. the combine is literally in the field.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I almost didn't go out because of that, because I thought, well, I mean, if the combine's driving around in circles, they're not going to want to come out. And my boss was like, no, deer don't care about that. They don't care about that at all. And I listened to him and went out there anyway, and he was sure right.
You just never know. Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I know you can't eat the antlers. I don't want to fantasize about antlers because it's the story that you just told, which is what it's all about. But what does he score on the scale?
He went 152 and an eighth, gross. So he's a 9-pointer. So not that I care much about nets, but I think he loses a few because of some of that stuff. So.
Wow.
Yeah. This is the first time I've ever cared about inches in my entire life.
That's amazing. Well, cool. I wanted to at least touch base on that story because that was pretty cool to see that come across on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, looks like you found one that was quite a nice deer as well. So.
Yeah, that was an ironic, like we said, that was on the 29th, and both Joe and I, it was within seconds. We both let an arrow go. It was, like you said, you just never know. And that night too, I got in late. We both got in late. Just, running behind family stuff, and just got to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that time of the year, any chance you can get to sit there, you got to be there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into, when I first met Ryan, we were working on the Outdoor Report TV show that was coming up on 2 winters ago, and we first went up to Thief River Falls in the winter, and we were doing a bit on the elk herds that are up in northwest Minnesota. So we went up in the winter. Eric Osberg and myself, we hooked up with some of the folks up there. Ryan wasn't there yet. That's when they were actually doing the collaring of the elk. And then I went back up that summer, and then that's when I first met you, Ryan, and I tagged along with Ryan for half a day, and you were kind of dinging the elk and finding out kind of the habitat they were using, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, the moms were with the baby or with the calves at that point in time, correct?
Yeah, we were trying to investigate some sites to see if we could find calves. And
can you give
go ahead, sorry.
No, can you give a little background on that whole project that was taking place up there?
Yeah, so those elk are still on the air. They have GPS collars that take a location kind of whenever we designate it. I think right now it's taking a location every 4 hours. But technology has come a long way, and it's amazing. We can log on to our online database and essentially the most updated locations for the animals we can view kind of right from the computer. So the general gist of the project is just to learn more about the elk that are in Minnesota. We don't know a lot about their habits. We don't know a ton about the habitats that they prefer. And, they're in such an interesting part of the state. The Northwest isn't what I imagined the Northwest to be before I'd gone up there. It's flat and it's open. There's a lot of ag. So we just wanted to learn kind of about the general movements and habitat use of cow elk in Minnesota.
So when we last left off, that was during the summer, and you were studying them. What took place, and what did you guys? Is that still going on? Are you still working on that, or where did you leave off when you kind of? I'm assuming you're not working on that now, correct?
Not specifically. So you'd met Alicia, the graduate student, working on. She's mainly working on the habitat portion of that study, and that's in progress. Our intent was that the collars would at least take locations through February of 2018, so that would be 2 years worth of data.
Yep.
And she's working on kind of wrapping that up and kind of concluding, what she found, since she's focusing on the habitat portion of the study. And then what we were running around doing that day was kind of trying to use the location data to understand how the cows were going about having calves. Were they moving away from other herd members and isolating themselves? And if they were isolating themselves, could we identify strictly by their locations when they were having calves? And in some instances, we could easily tell that cows were moving away. And then once they would kind of localize and not move away from an area for a week or two, it was pretty apparent that they must have had a calf and they were kind of staying in one area with it.
Sure. So what, I guess, in regards to the elk, once they have finished up with the research, is it their hopes to try to keep working with them, or just learn more about them and then kind of leave them from there, or is there kind of an end game that they're thinking, or is that too early to predict and you got to do more research?
Yeah, we'd like to do some more research. Whether it's going to be a priority or not, I'm not quite sure yet. We've got some deer research that I think is probably going to take priority coming up here soon.
Sure.
One thing that interests me is specifically calf survival. Whether or not we'll be able to do something like that, I'm not quite sure yet. But
yeah,
we'll hopefully learn quite a bit from the collared cows we have on the air now, and kind of use it to better inform how we want to go about elk management in the state going forward.
Did they ever, so on the collars, that just stays active? Did they ever have to change batteries, or that's been running since 2 years ago?
Yep. So the collars just have a general battery life. So once they die, once the collar batteries die, then that's when we lose them. These collars have a release mechanism on them, actually. So we can go in and send an email, and the collar, if it works right, should detach, and we can walk out there and get it.
Okay, sure. Is that what you do then? You go collect them?
Yeah, I've never been a part of a project that has that feature, so hopefully it works well. But yeah, that's what you end up doing. You send in the command to have the collar release, and then we'd walk out there and get them wherever they end up. So
how long did you work on that project for when we were up there? Was it just that summer?
Yeah, it was just that summer that I was looking into whether or not using that location data would allow us to find areas where cows were calving. And one of the bases for that was that our moose project up north, they found really, really clear indication of when the moose cows were having calves, just based on some general patterns and how they moved. And we wondered, well, maybe we can follow suit and see if the elk do the same thing. But we kind of concluded that they didn't necessarily give away the position of their calves like the moose did. And it wasn't as easy as just kind of walking to a spot looking for a calf and finding it, which sounds like that's kind of what the moose product was able to find. Yeah, they sounded like they were more like deer. They would have a fawn, hide it, and then every once in a while come back and feed, and then move away from the fawn or calf again, and just kind of keep them concealed.
Sure.
Which is in itself is pretty interesting. So.
Yeah. So when you left there, then from what we were chatting about earlier, or what you texted me when we were initially talking, you've been working on a squirrel project.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never heard of a project about squirrels. So it's interesting because you always hear, the deer, moose, elk, fish. everything but squirrels.
Yeah.
So tell us what's up with the squirrel project.
Sure. So we started a squirrel mortality project in it would have been the fall of 2015, and the study originated based on some small game survey results and just some general comment from squirrel hunters who thought that squirrel populations were in decline, especially on public lands that were close to the metro area. So to kind of address these perceptions, we looked into some areas that would be good study sites. We needed a site that was huntable, and then also a site that kind of matched the same kind of habitat conditions that was not huntable. So that way we could compare survival rates and see what kind of effect hunting is happening. So we ended up choosing Whitewater Wildlife Management Area, which is down in the southeast. It gets a lot of pressure from squirrel hunters. Many of those that squirrel hunt there come down from the Twin Cities, so it kind of matched what we wanted in terms of study site. And then nearly adjacent to the WMA was Whitewater State Park, so then we had our hunted and non-hunted sites kind of right there for us. So over the course of the last 2 years, we captured just a touch over 200 total squirrels, about 100 on each site, and they got radio collars. And these are the old school type that require taking an antenna out and listening for beeps. But our main focus was just looking at survival. And we go out at least once weekly, especially once hunting season was going on, listen for whether or not the squirrel was emitting normal or a mortality signal. And then if it was emitting a mortality signal, we'd go in and investigate and conclude what happened to the squirrels. So we are finishing that project up now. This last spring, our final squirrels that were on the air, the batteries died on the collars. And we're kind of in data analysis and final report writing mode now.
Okay. What did you end up finding? I mean, are you able to touch base on what you guys all came to fruition there?
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to start by looking just at yearly survival. How do they differ between the park and the WMA? And survival on the WMA, yearly survival was just a touch over 25%. And yearly survival on the state park was 49%. So a noticeable difference, nearly half of what the park survival was is what we found in the WMA. And the majority of the mortality that we saw on the WMA occurred within, I'd say, about the first 6 weeks of hunting season. So they really got hit hard on the front end.
I know. It seems like when I've been out hunting, you're either in a spot where there's tons of squirrels, or you're in a spot where there's not a squirrel. Do they live like in communities, or do they kind of go off on their own?
Yeah, they definitely will go off on their own, especially the juveniles. But I would say that there definitely are, kind of family groups that live together. But it seems like anywhere that there was good habitat, if we found oak trees and some nice oak hillsides, we generally had good success trapping them. Interestingly, I did not see that many squirrels on the WMA when I was romping around looking for spots to trap and even putting traps in. But then once you'd leave and come back and check the traps, there they'd be. Sure. So that was very interesting to me. I don't know if they're just really wary there or what, but we found squirrels once we figured out how to catch them, with oftentimes very little sign of them. So
I was reading in one of the articles about your squirrel research. Can you allude to what you actually found out to be the best way to trap them?
yeah. So we tried everything we could think of to catch squirrels, and of course, they're crazy for bird feeders. So we figured, corn and sunflower seeds, that'll work perfect. And it didn't work perfect at all, surprisingly. Peanut butter also didn't work that great. So we had only caught like 10 squirrels over the course of like a month or a month and a half our first year. And we just could not figure it out, especially in the state park, where we would see a ton of squirrels every time we'd walk around in there. But they just had no care for whatever we had in the traps. One day we were watching some squirrels, actually at the hotel that we were kind of based out of when we were doing the field work. And they were just going crazy in these walnut trees. And at that point, we had such little success. We're like, well, it's not going to be any worse than we've done. So we started picking whole walnuts right out of the trees, throwing them in the back of traps. And in like 3 weeks, we caught over 80 squirrels.
I picture you like when you're running around working on elk and whitetail. Everything kind of goes according to plan, but then when you switch over to squirrels, they make you go nuts. Not intended.
That's funny. That's a funny one, Les.
Well, they sound like they gave you a run for your money, though, at least a little bit.
They did, and I wouldn't have really expected it. I figured, all right, this will be fine. We'll catch squirrels, and they were challenging. Apparently, they have a very refined palate in the Whitewater Valley.
That's funny. You got any questions at all?
I have a question. What was the most common from your results? What's the most common reason for death in a squirrel, other than hunting? I would say.
We generally saw predation to be the next highest mortality cause. We weren't really going into a ton of detail with what kind of natural mortality, just because it wasn't necessarily a focus it wasn't our question in a sense.
Yep.
We were just, all right, is it hunting related or is it natural mortality? But if I had to recall, I would definitely say that predation was the next in line. But especially on the WMA though, hunting by far outweighed the rest of them.
Okay. On that same line, how about the average lifespan of a squirrel?
That's a great question. I would guess that the ones on the WMA, if they get to 2 or 3, is probably a pretty long-lived squirrel. We did have a few that we actually recaptured the next year, where their collars weren't working anymore, and then we actually replaced and gave them new ones. So those were probably 2 to 3 years old, but I wouldn't expect them to get a ton older than that. The state park, though, I bet you there's some fairly old squirrels there. How old? I guess I can't say for sure, but wouldn't be surprised if there were some 4, 5, 6-year-old squirrels there.
Jake, do you have anything?
Anything on squirrels? No. I have a quick comment, I guess. One of the parts that I read in your article, I believe it was your article, about how squirrels adapt their birthing numbers according to their mortality rate, and I just found that very interesting.
Yeah, it's been seen in other research where a population, if they're heavily pressured or there's a high mortality rate, that they'll breed twice or have bigger litters in response to that. I can't say for sure if that's something that were to be going on in the WMA in response to that high mortality rate. Because it just wasn't something we were looking at. But I would say most of the females that we captured that were sizable females looked like they had at least one litter during the prior year. But yeah, they can have 2 a year, and it would be very interesting to know if those WMA squirrels were maybe responding to the higher mortality rate by having 2 litters, or maybe the park weren't. Hard to say, but it's a cool and interesting thing to want to know more about. That's for sure.
Right. I've heard the same thing with coyotes trying to control coyote problem. They're
Yeah.
very to hunting, and they'll also adjust their litter size based off of their numbers in the area.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That I know has been published in scientific literature, where people think they're doing the deer a favor by killing 3 coyotes a year.
Yep.
But really, it's actually probably working against them.
Right. It seems like you either have to go all in or not at all with the coyotes.
You have to continue to trap them each year. There's no stopping once you start. So.
Right. What are the litter sizes of for a squirrel?
Probably 2 to 3 would be average. So, going back to kind of the survival rates, 25% seems pretty darn low. But for a species that can have maybe 2 to 3 litter, or 2 to 3 per litter, maybe 2 litters per year, I would think that it is sustainable. But I would guess that that's on the lower threshold of that.
Yep.
So we essentially, once we figured out how to catch the little rascals, once we found spots that look good, if we put a trap there, we generally caught at least one. So they're pound for pound though. They're pretty hardy little critters. Once you have them in your hand, it's like, wow, they're pretty powerful for for something that flies under the radar as a game species.
Right, and that's what I found interesting. I never really had a conversation about squirrels before. I've done a little hunting of it, not a ton. I would actually like to do some more with my son, but something you don't really think of. So that project's just wrapping up on your end, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So now what are you going to be getting into next?
So our next real big thing that we're going to be getting going here, well, we're very, very much into getting this started, is a CWD movement project in the southeast part of the state. You guys are probably well aware of, the disease management zone that we've now established and all the testing that's going on.
If you don't mind, Ryan, could you, for the people that are listening in that aren't aware what CWD is, can you give us just a little background on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of this interesting form of diseases that is in the same family as mad cow disease, scrapie in sheep, and then Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, that's in humans. It's actually caused by a misshaped protein called a prion. And essentially what it does is it affects the neurological system, where these misshaped proteins kind of bind and replicate and cause the normal proteins to also misfold. And over a period of time, it essentially causes holes to form in the brain. And as you can imagine, once that happens, neurological functions just continue to deteriorate to the point where the animal loses all of its motor functions and just general senses.
So is it essentially it dies of starvation eventually?
Yeah, it would die of starvation, or just not knowing that it needs to get water. And yeah, most of the deer that kind of make it to full term of sickness are found looking completely skinny and just what you'd expect an unhealthy deer to look like.
Sure.
One of the problems with it is that the life stage of the disease is fairly long, and those clinical signs I described generally don't happen until the last few months of carrying the disease. So it makes it challenging to identify, most of these deer that test positive look like perfectly healthy deer.
With what you're getting into, and give us a little background too of where kind of the state of CWD is within the state of Minnesota. I know there's some states around us that have been dealing with it for a couple of years longer than us, so it's a little bit newer to us on our end of it. But where are we at? What is your where's kind of state at? And obviously we got some more questions there.
Sure. So we first identified it in our wild population, I believe, a handful of years ago. This was before I worked for DNR, but I think it was just to the north of Rochester. There was one deer that was found positive, and a bunch of surveillance happened around that area, and not a single other positive deer was found, which is great. But then last year we again identified it in the wild herd in the southeast part of the state, and unfortunately we ended up finding 11 positive deer. So that kind of led us to establishing a disease management zone where we wanted to get more test results from within that zone to get a better idea of the expanse of the deer that have the disease, and also try to figure out kind of where it's headed and what direction are we going with it.
Right.
This year, I'm sure many people were a part of the extra surveillance efforts that were kind of in the central part of the state and then the north central. And we have to do that in response to game farms that have deer test positive on them, because we need to try to make sure that it isn't jumping into the wild herd around these areas. So I don't know, do you guys hunt up in any of those areas?
Down where you have the testing for it right now?
Yeah,
I hunt in Winona, so I
okay. So
with a little bit of what's going on down there. We're in east central Minnesota. I know the Stearns County, the little falls. I guess there's kind of a pocket around there, and then there was also the other game farm that was up, I think, near Crow Wing County.
Yep.
I believe those are kind of the two, I guess you could say, hot spots around our area, other than what's going down in zone 603 in the southeast.
603. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So as far as I have seen, we're still kind of waiting on test results for those northern surveillance efforts. Hopefully we'll know by the end of the month, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for good news. Unfortunately, in the southeast, we've identified, I see, 9 more positives, 5 of which are confirmed with a secondary test already.
Okay. Was that all in 603, or was that spread out?
That is all in 603, and it looks like we're still awaiting test results from the permit areas surrounding it. So we kind of expedited results for 603 because we knew that we'd identified the disease there, so we wanted to get test results back sooner. So we were getting test results back in about 4 to 5 days, I believe. Whereas the other areas of the state we were doing surveillance efforts, it was more on the lines of 14 to 20 days, I believe. So
sure. Do you guys have any questions on the CWD end of it?
Ryan, how does a deer actually contract the CWD? It's not an airborne, right? It's something that's in, like you said, it's a protein, but then it's something they have to eat?
Yeah. One of the things about the disease that also makes it challenging is we don't know a ton about it, but it does seem like one of the means of transmission is food sources. If you can imagine, a deer with a disease eating in one specific area and another coming and eating from that same exact spot, there's a good chance that it can pick up some of those misshaped proteins that the other deer has shed due to feeding, and then it kind of continues to have the potential to jump that away. So saliva is kind of the biggest factor in that. That's why we outlawed baiting. If you imagine, deer coming to one small corn pile, all those noses that keep going into that corn pile is not a good thing in terms of disease transmission.
Sure. I also suppose it's, since our knowledge on it is so limited, we don't really have a projected rate of how it could potentially affect the Minnesota deer herd, like say 5 to 10 years down the road.
Yeah, other states are working on models like that, and I can't say that I can recall results, but I know that I believe Wisconsin, that there were some folks working on some models that predicted how the disease was going to move through the herd, but it was in the early stages, and because we haven't found that many positive deer in the herd in Minnesota, we're hoping that we're still kind of on the front end of an infection, and have hopes that maybe we can get it under control.
Right. And that's where I give you guys credit. And I know a lot of people, there's emotions that are all running through with what's going on this. And it's Mother Nature. How do you control something that could be uncontrollable?
Right.
But and that's where sometimes I get a little frustrated when you see some of the outlash of what you guys are trying to do. Because whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, at least we've got an agency that's trying to keep a pulse on it and trying to figure it out. Down in 603, I know last year when they had that season, trying to kill a bunch of deer. Is that something that you want to do as a hunter or a sportsman? My thought is most no, but to get a grasp, like you said, on the front end, are you going to stop it? Maybe not, but to understand where it's at, what are we dealing with, how bad is it? There might be some bad years of, taking some herds out that you hate to see take out, but I've been wrapping my brain on it of how would you go about it? Because even if you didn't do something, 10 years down the road, if you don't do anything, now you're ridiculed for not trying. So I at least hand it to you I know the department caught some heck for some of the decisions that you guys have to do, but my hat's off to at least trying. At least we got an agency that, through with being here in the United States, we got that, so that's a plus.
Yeah. Hey, well, we appreciate that. We appreciate the kind words, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, people get a little carried away. It's good to have hunters and sportsmen out there, voicing your opinion and trying to be part of the solution. But you see some that where the way they're conveying it's just more of a problem.
Yeah. Well, I empathize with hunters because I am one myself, and I don't know how I would feel if I had property that I hunted that was smack in the middle of this
right
mess,
Yep.
But like you said, we chose our approach, and it was something that we feel that we need to do. Wisconsin at the moment, their approach is passive, where they will continue to test deer, but they're not necessarily doing anything in hopes of stamping it out. But we're not going to get a handle on it if we don't give it a shot.
Right.
And that is the majority of how everyone feels within the agency, that if we can do something now, we may as well. And like you said, if we look back and aren't able to accomplish it, we'll at least say that we did what we thought was in the best interest of the deer herd. So
Right.
We'll see how it plays out, of course, but
Yep.
but that's our angle, and we're hoping that it pans out for us.
So what's your involvement going to be within your, what's coming up on that end of it? You'll be working solely with that CWD project?
That'll be a big one. Well, we also have a few other things going on in my specific office, the Farmland Research Office. One thing we're getting into, we can stick to CWD or we'll talk about this later, but just I'll mention it now that we're working on a different approach to doing some general deer surveys, roadside surveys. Oftentimes they're conducted in the more open ag parts of the state where we use spotlights, but we're starting to look into the possibility of using thermal imaging cameras instead of spotlights and seeing how the two methods stack up to one another. Because there's some research that says that these thermal cameras do a good job of identifying deer in spots where you'd miss them with a spotlight, and kind of vice versa. There's times where maybe thermal cameras aren't the best option, so we're going to investigate that coming up here, hopefully this spring. That's just kind of a different deer survey project that we've got in the works in the Farmland Research Office. But for the time being, though, the CWD project is high on the list of things here, because we're going to be trying to capture deer starting as early as mid-January.
Okay.
We want a GPS collar 115 deer around the periphery of the current 603 boundary. And we want to try to learn more about movements of deer around the boundary in habitat types that are very similar to what the deer have in the disease management zone. And just kind of get an idea of how do deer move, what kind of home ranges do they have, and look at it in terms of disease transmission. Do yearling bucks move a long distance? So say that animal were CWD positive. How much area does it cover, and how could that affect other deer as it moves?
Jake, you had a question. That was a good one. I forget what it was.
As a small property owner, what are some of the do's and don'ts that I could do, or any person could do, to potentially ward off or help to prevent the spread and or start of CWD?
Well, I would say the first is look at what kind of deer densities your property holds. In any disease type situation, the more deer there are, the higher the chance that herd's going to be infected. And I think that kind of plays into why we're seeing it in the southeast, because there are such high deer densities in that part of the state. So in terms of one deer moving it from them to another, when there's 20 or 30 deer per square mile, they're going to come in contact with many more deer potentially, or feed in the same places where many other deer feed, where that disease has the ability to potentially jump. So that would be kind of the first step is, if you're seeing a lot of deer and you can harvest more without really jeopardizing, your hunting for years to come, I would say that's a great first step.
Awesome. It makes sense, I guess. It all relates back to the saliva kind of exchange and feeding in similar places, and the more deer that feed in one area, the disease spreads more. So that makes perfect sense.
What, Joe, do you have anything else?
The main way it spreads, would you say it's human trafficking? Because I'm highly doubting that deer slowly, move their way, because it kind of started in central United States, didn't it?
Started in Colorado.
starting on his way out.
Yeah, in the 80s actually. Close enough.
Breeding deer, or is it transportation?
You know, I guess I don't know for sure. You know, one of the links that is often heard is game farms. And just as an example, the two farms I believe that we had positive deer found this year, I believe that the deer came from the same site. So those kind of movements that are, you know, within pens, is a way that it very likely could have been started way back when.
Sure.
And then once it gets into the wild population, then you know there's just no way to control, you know, deer from interacting
Any which direction, right?
Yeah, and in the wild population, deer to deer contact is as far as we know the number one way that it spreads.
Sure. Are you guys? Do you work pretty closely, or does the DNR work closely with a lot of the businesses that are operating with deer and pens?
We don't, and one of the main reasons is because they fall under the jurisdiction of agriculture.
Okay.
So DNR doesn't have any regulation with those, and I believe it's the Board of Animal Health that oversees those operations. So they adhere to the rules set by the Board of Animal Health, and we try to work effectively with Board of Animal Health. So
sure, trying to work together.
Yeah. Which in what we're going through is going to be a necessary thing. So
right. Okay. Well, I don't got anything else on the CWD end of it. Do you guys have anything else?
No, I think you did a really good job. You covered a lot of questions, a lot of information.
Good.
What?
I don't know if you guys are ever listening to the Meat Eater podcast.
All the time.
Or I don't know if you've heard the CWD episode. I think it's in the 80s for which episode, or maybe the 70s. But it's fantastic. If you're interested at all in CWD, the guest that they have on is just fantastic for information and understanding kind of how the disease works. So
almost as good as you.
This guy's a legitimate scientist. He is way better. Way better.
No, and I appreciate going into it because I know CWD is a touchy thing, and I think the biggest thing, and even to Jake's point of trying to do things on a local level, what can you start doing to be proactive? It might not be here, it might be far away, but if this is the cards that we're dealt as humans to deal with this, it's going to get interesting.
Yeah, and another thing, if you have a parcel of land that you're interested in kind of keeping tabs on the disease, get the deer tested. Where I hunt in Wisconsin, we're not in a disease affected zone, but I told my dad and my uncle this year that I'd like to get these deer tested. Sure. And if one were to come back positive, we can make the decisions on what to do with it later. And in my mind, I probably would get rid of the deer, but it's up to personal preference. But at least it's a start where we can know yes or no whether that deer is infected, and then make decisions once we know.
What?
So,
go ahead.
I was going to mention, I think that anyone can get their deer tested if it's sent to, I think the U of M has a veterinary lab that you can just send samples to, and I'm sure there's some sort of fee involved with it, but
sure.
But at this point, as CWD continues to spread, I recently read that Montana just found their first wild case. It's something that I'm going to try to do as much as possible, and hopefully others will follow suit, even if they're not in an area that requires it.
So that was just found out in Montana, like recently?
I believe within the last week or two, I read that headline.
Which, that surprised me just because with it originating out there was in the 1967 or something like that.
It was a long time ago. Yeah.
60s, 70s or somewhere, but that was out in Colorado. I'm actually surprised that just showed up there, just if you think geography.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if it has to do with densities of deer or elk or whatever cervids are out there. I don't know that the deer densities are like what we have here in Minnesota. And with smaller densities, I would expect the disease to not be able to travel as quickly between the herd. But don't quote me on that.
Well, I'm interested to see what you guys find out over especially the next year here.
Yeah, well, I'll put out a shameless plug here. So we are looking for landowners who are outside of the boundary of 603, but within, say, 5, 10, 15 miles of the boundary, who would be interested in letting us capture deer on private parcels. Sure. And what we want to do is we want to be able to share the information that we get with private landowners. Like if I had DNR come in and catch deer on my property, heck yeah, I'd want to know what that deer is doing.
Right.
I'd want to know, does it stay in there? Is it going somewhere? How do they move and how do they use my property? And that's something that we'd really like to share with folks who want to participate.
Yep.
So if anyone's listening and has some property that falls within that 10-ish mile range of 603, we're hoping to catch deer there. So.
And I'm looking up on the computer here. So zone 603, for the folks that are listening, if you know folks in that area, I'm just trying to see here. Do you know the cities offhand that you'd be talking about there?
Yeah, so we're looking like maybe not cities, but we're looking probably the western-ish parts of Houston County. We're looking at the southeast of Olmsted County, probably central Mower County, and I think Wabasha County. I'm trying to look at this map. It's not great, but to the west, like Spring Valley area,
looks like
just
Preston's kind of right smack dab in the middle.
Yep, Preston is dead center. And to the east, I think Rushford is just outside, so Rushford area, and a little bit to the east, anything in there. As you get north, probably St. Charles-ish.
Okay.
In that area. And then Chatfield is right on the boundary. So anything that kind of heads out towards the northwest from Chatfield would be fantastic as well.
Oh, I do know folks down towards Winona. Would that be too far?
Winona's probably pushing 20-ish miles.
I would say, yeah.
From that boundary. But one of the things is I don't know how much participation we're going to have. Ideally, we want to catch deer as close to that boundary as possible.
Okay.
But if we have to move outward, then that's what we're going to have to do. The reason we want to catch them close to the boundary is we will still potentially be able to see them move in and out of the disease management area. But
right.
Hopefully they won't be subject to the extra hunting opportunities. We just don't want to collar deer that are then just going to get shot.
Sure.
Because then we don't learn anything from them. So
that's
kind of the idea behind it, at least. So
sure. Lots of stuff happening.
Yeah, it's going to be a big effort, and we're not going to be able to do it without private landowners coming forward. So
Right.
it'll be a big effort for a lot of folks, not just DNR, and hopefully the people around there and other hunters in the state are interested in what we can find, and hopefully learn something from how these deer move in terms of how can diseases spread like this.
Yep. For anyone that's listening, that's something out there. It's something to go research. At least know what's going on and what we're dealing with, because it's real and it's here, and now's the time to try to focus on it. What to end it off, do you guys have anything else?
I know. I think covered a lot of awesome information.
I wanted to end, Ryan, with one question for you. I asked my son Carter if he had one question that he wanted to ask you. At first he said, "No, I don't got. I'm good. I'm good." And I said, "Oh, you got to ask Ryan one question." So this is my 8-year-old or 7-year-old son's question. Are you ready?
Oh boy, I think so. Okay.
It's honestly the toughest question you'll have to answer all night. No joke. Where do squirrels come from?
Oh man. Where
So
do squirrels come from?
Yeah, well, that was his question for you.
Well, I guess it might depend on your faith, or if you believe in the squirrel stork.
The trees.
That's a great question.
They come from the trees, Carter.
The trees. They do come from the trees. Well, maybe we'll have to do some more research on that.
Yep, I think so. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to chat with us and getting into some of the stuff that you've got going on there at the DNR. For everyone that wants to learn more, where can folks go to find out what's happening with the woods and the water in the state?
Oh, sure. Keep tabs on the DNR's website. We try to put out news releases with most updated things going on with DNR and DNR research. And for the most part, if you search enough on the DNR website, you should be able to find it.
Perfect.
So, another good way is keep tabs on, Facebook pages, things like that. So we've got plenty of that in regards to DNR work as well.
Sure. Real quick, is your hunting season over, or what do you have up next?
So I am still in the process of doing some hunting in Wisconsin. So it's gun deer season in Wisconsin right now. I'm going to be very picky though. I've actually got 2 deer this year because I unfortunately got my Wisconsin buck a day early with my truck on Friday. So on my way to 2 deer hunt, I got one on the highway, so that was fantastic. But but still working on a Wisconsin deer. I think a big doe would be a perfect candidate here if she ever steps out.
Sure.
And then I'm hoping to get my roommate back out on the property that I shot my archery deer, because there's still some nice ones hanging around, and they keep showing up in daylight. So I'm hoping they keep that up.
Are you? I seen on your Facebook page that you're a waterfowl hunter. Do you do late season, or is that wrapped up for you?
I haven't done a ton of late season stuff. If an opportunity presents itself, I will definitely be out there. But I generally focus my efforts on a trip I take to North Dakota each year. A couple buddies and I go out, and we spend a week out there in early October, and it's been a good last couple of years. So
super.
We do well for early in the season, and we generally don't have to fight with people for spots. So it's been a lot of fun.
Nice.
So, and after 7 days of it, I generally get my fix on waterfowl hunting. So then I will sporadically go here and there in Minnesota if given the opportunity.
Okay, sure. All right. Well, Joe's unwrapping candy now, so I think that's a sign that.
Oh, he's done. He's checked out, huh?
All right. Well,
all right.
Appreciate
it.
It.
I won't keep you guys. I was going to ask if you guys had anything on tap yet for hunting. So I'd feel feel like I've done a poor job of asking you guys questions.
No, this is all about you, and what's going on with everything in the state. Myself, Joe, you can eat your Smarties. I'm actually, as we were kind of talking about this earlier, just about being, fortunate to take out and kind of what to do with yourself. So actually, my wife has never hunted before, and I think I've got her convinced to go out muzzle loading. So she said that she's going to do it. So actually, yesterday with Joe and Jake, we went out and put a blind on a spot. Her biggest thing, she said, I don't want to be cold. So we're putting a blind up. We'll put a heater in there, and hoping that she gets a shot at a something, whatever she wants to take, whatever is right for her. So that's what I got. Maybe a little bit of late season waterfowl, or I can still shoot one more doe, but that's it for me. How about you, Joe?
I'm all tagged out. I got plenty of meat in the freezer. I was lucky enough to shoot an elk this fall in Colorado.
Wow.
Freezer's full, so
I bet. That's awesome. Someday I'll make it out there.
Yeah, it was a bucket lister, big time.
No, that's great.
Yep.
Jake?
I'm all tagged out as well. I'll probably turn my attention now here in, say a month to doing some other property management. I'd like to clear out some brush and create some more trails and food plot areas, and maybe do some hinge cutting on my new land that I just purchased.
Nice.
The seasons never stop.
Nope. Sounds like you guys have plenty to do and have plenty of stuff to keep your attention, even beyond sitting in a tree or going elsewhere looking for your quarry.
That won't be a problem.
Very good.
Hey, well, good luck to you, Ryan, hunting right now. I take you guys will be out in the morning, huh?
We're going in the morning. Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Definitely good luck.
Send us a pic if you have something going on.
I will definitely do that. Thanks, guys, for the time. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Talk to you later.
Okay. See ya.
All right, folks. There you have it. That's the wrap up of today's podcast. I thank you all who are still listening. And I appreciate the other folks who have listened to the other podcasts and are sticking with. I'm not doing this the right way. I'm doing it the cheap way right now. I don't have it on iTunes. I haven't made time to get on iTunes yet. If anyone's listening out there that wants to help us get this show on the iTunes, we'll pay you for it. I need help trying to get it on there. I'm busy with full-time job and family and other stuff on the side. So I haven't made time, but if someone's willing to try to help us get it on iTunes, I'd sure love to help, and we'll be willing to compensate for it. So anyone that is interested in that, give us a shout. But for right now, I'm going to continue trying to do it this way. The quality of the phone call, it's mediocre, I would say. On the app that I'm using, there's some static in the back that you can hear, so I apologize for that. But again, to what Eric Osberg says, done is better than perfect. So I wanted to at least start the podcast, get it going. I know we've got some improvements to make in both the quality of the call and getting it to where it's more easy access platform, or an easier platform to access it. So and the host, he's not that great either. So I'm looking forward to somebody else coming aboard that wants to be the host or be a co-host. One of my thoughts is, if you've got somebody in mind that you think should be on the podcast, or if you want to be on the podcast, give me a shout, or come on up to where we got the Smoky Hills studio, and let's sit down and chat about whatever you want to chat about, or if you got somebody that you want to chat to. So we are open to any and all options here. So whatever ideas you've got, give us a call, send us a message. Might just be something that might just work out. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Have a safe holiday season here. Safe travels to all. Everyone that's out hunting yet, good luck, stay safe. And everyone that's getting into ice fishing, best of luck to you as well. We'll be down at the St. Paul Ice Show next week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I myself will be in the Smoky Hills Outdoor Store booth and working there, and then I'll be running around a little bit with a camera, trying to do some video. and stuff for the outdoor report. And we might try to squeak in a podcast with somebody if anyone's willing to chat with us down there. So to the ice fishing folks, we'll be running around down there. Other than that, till next time, we'll see you later. Thanks for listening.